Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Church Dogmatics by Emil Brunner. We're going to take a look at the second part of the concept of the holy with regard to the doctrine of God. And I'm glad that Brunner gave us this additional number of pages because he really does bring home some very important issues here. But before we get started, let me make a few preliminary comments to kind of put a little bit of focus into this lesson. You know, when we think of the Reformation, we think of Martin Luther, and Martin Luther did launch the Reformation, but he was a very uncompromising individual, and he needed to be that kind of individual to really launch the protest for the Reformation. But the Reformation never would have become a concrete reality without a disciple of Martin Luther, a man by the name of Melanchthon. It was Melanchthon who formed the core belief document signed by the princes that was presented to the emperor that launched the Reformation in reality. And everyone knew that Martin Luther could not do that. So the Reformation is really due to Martin Luther and Professor Melanchthon. Melanchthon was a professor of New Testament Greek at the same university where Martin Luther taught, and a disciple of Martin Luther. He joined the Reformation. But he composed the core belief document signed by the princes, and he's the one that made the Reformation concrete. Now, I bring that up because Karl Barth is the father of neo-orthodoxy. Karl Barth is the father of dialectical theology. His disciple is Emil Brunner. His first disciple was Emil Brunner. And Emil Brunner took his Barth's theology to America. He taught at Princeton Theological Seminary, and he made Barth accessible, and he made Barth popular. But one thing he did also that Barth didn't do, now Barth gets credit for this because obviously Brunner is a disciple of Barth, but Barth neglected one of the most fundamental dialectics in dialectical theology, and we're going to look at it in block 1, and that's the fact that Brunner said there is an imprint of the Spirit on our creation. From the very moment of creation, there is an imprint of Spirit on creation. And he said it's mentioned in the scriptures in Romans 1:20. It's called the invisible things. The invisible things of Spirit are imprinted on our creation. And so Brunner did agree with Barth that God is wholly other. That was the big protest against liberalism. Liberalism denied a realm of transcendence. Liberalism denied the realm of spirit. Barth said, God is wholly other. God is transcendent. God has a realm of spirit. And Brunner took that up. But in this lesson, we're going to see that Brunner did not neglect a very fundamental dialectic. There is a general revelation. And he based that on Romans 1:20. We're going to look at 175 to 183. It's going to be the additional pages to the idea of the holy. All right, block 1. The dialectic between the God who is wholly other and a creation imprinted with invisible things in Romans 1:20. We're talking about Brunner says we're talking about the transcendence of essence when we say God is wholly other. It's essence as creator. Acts 17:28. Very powerful verse. In him we live and move and have our being. We live, we move, and we have our being inside God. But then Brunner says, but we must also examine likeness and the historical context. The context of historical revelation. There is an existing dialectic between God as wholly other and the self created in God's image. And the self created in God's image. Wholly other refers to God as creator, Lord, and giver. It is a transcendence of essence. However, Romans 1:20 tells us that creation has been imprinted with the invisible things of spirit. Image of God refers to the self as a subject with freedom and with speech. Now here's the point. This dialectic makes possible the incarnation of revelation. In order for this likeness in the self to become the bearer of the divine word, the self has been created as subject. Thus comes the possibility of incarnate revelation. That's an important dialectic that was ignored by Karl Barth. Now, does Karl Barth get credit for this too? Yes, he does. Karl Barth is the reason we have Emil Brunner. But Brunner is like he's Barth's Melanchthon, okay? Brunner is Karl Barth's Melanchthon. He's the disciple who made Barth more accessible. He made Barth's theology a whole lot more accessible, and he brought it to the United States. But I think I'd have to agree completely with Emil Brunner here on this very fundamental dialectic that was pretty much ignored by Karl Barth, because Romans 1:20 is very clear about that. So, I think that there is an imprint of the invisible things of spirit on creation from the very moment of creation. From the very moment of creation. In other words, there has always been a realm of spirit available for humanity to take up that possibility of participation in. Now, in Block 2, we talk about the loss of the holy. Like I say, I'm glad that Brunner gave us these additional pages. Now, the loss of the holy is through the destructive influence of philosophical positivism. And we don't have to go all the way back to John Locke. We can look at today and postmodernism. Postmodernism is the new philosophical positivism because it denies absolute truth, because it denies a realm of transcendence, because it denies a realm of spirit. Let's go to 2, note 1. The intolerance of absolute truth. The Christian faith negates the current relativism because truth itself is intolerant. We affirm a God of sovereign will and a God of self-surrender, saving grace. The destructive influence of positivism. It posits an autonomous ethic, separated entirely from the will of God, eliminating the mystery of transcendence altogether, claiming that ethics arises autonomously from the psyche. Now, do you notice what's going on here? Human reason is elevated above God. That's what's going on here. Human reason is given a supreme priority. That's the position of positivism. It prioritizes human reason, human secular reason. So reclaiming the mystery of transcendence, we must reclaim the idea of the holy. Brunner says the idea of responsibility, the idea that we have of a moral limit, both have a numinous quality to them and, in other words, a spiritual quality to them, and that spiritual quality, that's the true foundation of our conscience. Our conscience is a gift of divine spirit. It's not a product of secular reason. Conscience is spiritual. Conscience, human conscience. The foundation of conscience is numinous and spiritual. And I'm going to agree with Brunner. I think he's right. And today, and I appreciate philosophy, but postmodernism, and I've done a lot of study on postmodernism, but postmodernism is, they take a philosopher I really like Hegel. They take Hegel and they reread Hegel, and they only accept his philosophy of subjective spirit, in other words, his philosophy of the psychology or the mind, and then they radically reinterpret it from a left-wing point of view, radical left-wing philosophy. And transcendence becomes simply intersubjectivity for the postmodern philosophical movement. It all started in France. Around the 1960s, and I've studied it, and I can appreciate it at a certain level, but it cannot become a worldview. It cannot become a worldview. It cannot stand as a worldview. It denies the realm of spirit. Let's go on to block 3. Note 3. Block 3, note 1. There's just one note there, but that'll bring up the conclusion. Holiness is revealed in Christ. And in Christ, agape, self-giving love, is established as the norm, where the holy God reveals himself in the personhood of Jesus Christ. In the hypostasis, remember, hupa, under, stasis, existence, under the category of existence, God reveals himself in the personhood of Christ. Now, spiritual blindness posits an autonomous false ethic because it elevates secular reason. Postmodernism elevates secular reason, and it remains alienated from God. It is spiritual blindness. And that's unfortunate because the general philosophical outlook today looks at the empirical world, and the surface reality, the empirical reality, is considered the real. But there is a minority, there is a remnant that can look at empirical reality and see the underlying spiritual reality. That's not everyone. That's a remnant minority, unfortunately. But those that do recognize a realm of spirit also, because they've reached a certain level of maturity, they realize they did not acquire that ability on their own. They did not acquire it through the faculty of reason. They acquired it as a gift from Christ, a gift from their Redeemer, a gift from the Messiah. what we know as disciples of Christ, we know because we've been gifted with that understanding. And that's it. I mean, there's no way around that. We know we've been gifted with grace. We've been in that trap before, that trap of the empirical world, that trap of surface reality, that trap of prioritizing the self over everything else. A very destructive, sinful trap. But through Christ we've been delivered out of it and given the blessing of faith. That's going to wrap up the additional lesson on the concept of the holy, pages 175 to 183. Our next lesson will take up chapter 15, pages 183 to 205. 183 to 205 on God is love. That's going to wrap up 14b.